Every generation has its visionaries. In Silicon Valley, where dreams turn into billion-dollar realities, Elizabeth Holmes was once hailed as the next Steve Jobs. A Stanford dropout with a bold idea, she promised a healthcare revolution. But as history would reveal, her innovation came with a cost, one that would unravel into one of the biggest frauds the world had ever seen. Born in Washington, D.C. in 1984, Elizabeth Holmes came from a family steeped in power and influence. Her father, Christian Holmes IV, worked for Enron, and her mother, Noel Daoust, was a congressional staffer. From an early age, Elizabeth displayed an almost obsessive drive to succeed. She idolized her great-great-grandfather, Christian R. Holmes, a medical pioneer. Determined to leave her mark, young Elizabeth dreamed of becoming a scientist, an inventor, and a billionaire. Her parents nurtured her ambition, pushing her to aim for greatness. In high school, Elizabeth was known for her focus and intelligence. She learned Mandarin and spent a summer in China, where she developed an entrepreneurial spirit. Her classmates would later recall her intense determination, describing her as someone destined for big things. In 2002, Elizabeth enrolled at Stanford University to study chemical engineering. She quickly impressed her professors with her ideas and drive. But something was missing. Holmes wasn't satisfied with studying. She wanted to create. At 19, she pitched her first idea, a wearable patch that could diagnose illnesses and deliver drugs. Although the concept failed, it laid the foundation for her next big idea, Theranos. Holmes dropped out of Stanford in her sophomore year. She convinced her professor, Dr. Channing Robertson, to back her new venture. With his endorsement, she secured initial funding and officially founded Theranos in 2003. The dream had begun. Elizabeth Holmes didn't just sell an idea, she sold herself. Inspired by her idol, Steve Jobs, she adopted his signature black turtleneck and minimalist style. Her deep voice and unwavering confidence made her a magnet for attention. She positioned herself as a revolutionary. Holmes claimed her technology, a small device called the Edison, could perform hundreds of blood tests from a single drop of blood. It was a promise that, if true, would change medicine forever. By 2005, Holmes had raised millions in funding. Investors believed in her vision, and Theranos grew rapidly. But behind the scenes, there was one glaring problem. The technology didn't work. As Theranos expanded, Holmes surrounded herself with powerful allies. She built a board of directors that included former U.S. Secretaries of State Henry Kissinger and George Shultz. With such names behind her, the company became untouchable. In 2010, Holmes met Ramesh Sunny Balwani, a software executive 19 years her senior. Balwani became her business partner and, secretly, her romantic partner. Together, they built an empire founded on secrecy and control. Theranos opened state-of-the-art labs and announced partnerships with major corporations like Walgreens and Safeway. By 2014, the company was valued at $9 billion, and Holmes was named the youngest self-made female billionaire by Forbes. Despite its dazzling success, cracks were beginning to show. Employees at Theranos grew concerned about the Edison machines. They frequently failed tests, producing wildly inaccurate results. Doctors who used Theranos technology began reporting errors. Patients received incorrect diagnoses, leading to unnecessary treatments and missed diseases. But Holmes insisted everything was fine. Inside the company, dissent was not tolerated. Employees who questioned the technology were fired or threatened with lawsuits. Holmes and Balwani created a culture of fear where secrecy reigned supreme. In 2015, investigative journalist John Carreyrou of the Wall Street Journal received a tip from a former Theranos employee. They claimed the company was lying about its technology. Carreyrou began digging, speaking to whistleblowers, and uncovering a trail of deception. He discovered that Theranos wasn't using its Edison machines for most tests. Instead, they relied on commercial lab equipment and manipulated results. The revelations were damning. Carreyrou published his findings in October 2015, exposing the company's lies to the world. But Holmes didn't back down. She called the reports baseless and accused critics of being afraid of disruption. In the wake of the investigation, regulators began scrutinizing Theranos. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, CMS, found multiple violations in the company's labs. In 2016, they banned Holmes from owning or operating a lab for 2 years. Walgreens terminated its partnership with Theranos, and investors started pulling out. Lawsuits piled up, and the company began to crumble under the weight of its own lies. Holmes tried to salvage the company, but the damage was done. The once revered startup was now a symbol of Silicon Valley's darkest tendencies. Elizabeth Holmes promised to revolutionize healthcare. Instead, she delivered a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked ambition. Her rise and fall remind us of the fine line between vision and delusion, and the cost of chasing dreams built on lies. By 2017, the cracks in Theranos had widened into chasms. Investors demanded answers, employees fled, and lawsuits multiplied. Holmes, once hailed as the next great innovator, was now accused of fraud. The company attempted to pivot, quietly shutting down its labs and test centers. entrepreneurs. Holmes even sought new investments to keep the dream alive, but the revelations were too damaging. No one was willing to bet on a company shrouded in scandal. Theranos laid off nearly all of its employees. The end was inevitable. In 2018, the company officially dissolved, leaving a trail of broken promises, ruined careers, and lives potentially endangered by inaccurate test results. In March 2018, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, filed charges against Elizabeth Holmes and Sunny Balwani. The allegations were staggering. They had raised over $700 million from investors based on fraudulent claims. According to the SEC, Holmes knowingly misled investors, patients, and doctors about the capabilities of Theranos technology. The Edison machine, they revealed, had never been capable of delivering on its promises. Holmes agreed to settle the civil charges, relinquishing control of the company and paying a $500,000 fine. But the criminal investigation was just beginning. In June 2018, a federal grand jury indicted Holmes and Balwani on 9 counts of wire fraud and 2 counts of conspiracy to commit wire fraud. In September 2021, Elizabeth Holmes faced a jury in one of the most high-profile trials in Silicon Valley's history. Her defense painted her as a visionary who simply made mistakes, while prosecutors argued she was a calculating fraudster. Over the course of the trial, jurors heard testimony from former employees, investors, and patients. They recounted stories of deception, fear, and the lengths Holmes went to maintain the illusion of success. Holmes's defense team argued that she had genuinely believed in Theranos' mission. They claimed she had been misled by her advisors and manipulated by Balwani, who they alleged was abusive and controlling. It was a dramatic and complex case that captivated the nation. On January 3, 2022, the jury delivered its verdict. Elizabeth Holmes was found guilty on 4 counts of fraud related to deceiving investors. She was acquitted on charges related to defrauding patients. The remaining charges resulted in a hung jury. The guilty verdict marked a turning point in the tech world. It was a rare instance of Silicon Valley accountability, sending a clear message to entrepreneurs: ambition cannot come at the expense of honesty. Holmes faced up to 20 years in prison for each count. Her sentencing was delayed several times as her lawyers filed appeals and argued for leniency. In the end, she received a sentence of over a decade behind bars. Sunny Balwani, the former COO of Theranos, played a key role in the company's rise and fall. As Holmes' right-hand man and secret romantic partner, he helped enforce the culture of secrecy and fear within Theranos. Prosecutors described Balwani as Holmes' enforcer. Employees testified that he regularly berated staff and demanded loyalty, but Balwani claimed he was merely following Holmes' orders. In 2022, Balwani faced his own trial. He was found guilty on all 12 charges of fraud and sentenced to nearly 13 years in prison. Like Holmes, his downfall was a stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked power. The victims of Theranos weren't just investors who lost millions. They were real people who trusted the company's promises. Patients received incorrect cancer diagnoses, were told they were pregnant when they weren't, or were falsely reassured about serious conditions. One patient, who relied on a Theranos blood test, was wrongly informed they had a miscarriage. Another was told they had HIV when they didn't. These errors caused emotional and physical harm that could not be undone. Holmes claimed she never intended to hurt anyone, but the damage was undeniable. The victims' stories added a human element to the trial, reminding the world that this wasn't just a business failure, it was a moral one. Throughout the trial, Elizabeth Holmes remained a media sensation. From her signature black turtleneck to her calculated demeanor, she was a figure who fascinated and divided public opinion. Some saw her as a victim of Silicon Valley's fake-it-till-you-make-it culture. Others viewed her as a con artist who exploited the system. Documentaries, books, and even a Hollywood series chronicled her story. The media frenzy kept the spotlight on Holmes, ensuring her legacy would be remembered, not as a visionary, but as a cautionary tale. Theranos wasn't just a story about one person, it was a story about Silicon Valley itself. The startup culture, with its emphasis on disruption and innovation, often rewards bold claims over tangible results. Holmes leveraged this culture to her advantage, securing millions without ever proving her technology worked. Investors, eager for the next big thing, asked few questions and ignored warning signs. The Theranos scandal forced the tech industry to reflect on its priorities. How many other startups, critics wondered, were operating on a similar foundation of hype and secrecy? Today, Elizabeth Holmes is a far cry from the billionaire icon she once was. After her sentencing, she faced financial ruin, legal battles, and a damaged reputation she may never recover from. Holmes gave birth to 2 children before reporting to prison, a move some critics claimed was an attempt to garner sympathy during her sentencing. Her once prominent voice has been largely silent since the trial. While Holmes maintains she never intended to deceive, the evidence tells a different story. Her name is now synonymous with fraud, a legacy that overshadows her initial ambition. The Theranos scandal exposed exposed flaws in the system. It highlighted the dangers of unregulated startups, the risks of blind faith in visionaries, and the human cost of prioritizing profits over ethics. Investors and regulators have since taken steps to prevent another Theranos. But the question remains, how many Elizabeth Holmeses are still out there waiting to be discovered? The story of Theranos is a wake-up call for innovation, reminding us that true progress must be built on a foundation of truth. Elizabeth Holmes's story is one of deception and downfall through rough and unplanned ambition. It's a tale that asks us to question our heroes, demand accountability, and never forget the human cost of unchecked ambition. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the rise and fall of Elizabeth Holmes. If you found this story interesting, please like, comment, and subscribe to Insight Vault for more in-depth looks at the stories that shape our world.